Number 62. Ever since John had solved the mystery of memory, he had been on the lookout for another. But mysteries didn't seem to come along very often, and some mysteries turned out not to be mysteries after all. There was the time when he had seen a man and a woman quarrelling in a garden, and suddenly the man flashed out a knife. But when John yelled out that he was going for the police, it turned out that the two were only rehearsing their parts in a play. John had felt very foolish over that. And another time he had reported a mysterious sack on the other side of a hedge, apparently full of stolen goods. But it was only a sack of potatoes, left there by the farmer for his brother to fetch as he passed by on his way to market. "I'd better be careful next time," thought John to himself. "I won't report anything unless I'm absolutely sure about it." Now, one afternoon he went by himself to Oak Tree Wood. There was a big tree there he liked to climb. It was an easy one, and he could get almost to the top. And from the top he could see a very long way indeed. It was like being in a ship, because the wind swayed the tree, big as it was, and the movement was like a boat going over waves. John liked it. If he shut his eyes, he felt as if he were right out at sea. So this afternoon, up the tree he went. He was soon at the top, looking out over the countryside, which lay smiling in the summer sunshine. John had a book with him. He opened it, settled himself comfortably on a branch, and began to read. Sometimes he looked out from his high perch and saw the lorries, buses and cars going along the roads. He saw a car stop and pull off the road onto the grass verge. A man got out and disappeared. John waited idly for him to come back, but he didn't. Surely he hadn't gone for a picnic all by himself. John went on reading his book, occasionally glancing up to see if the car was still there. After half an hour, the car was still pulled up, empty. John began to wonder about it. Then he suddenly heard the crack of a twig in the wood below, as if someone had trodden on one and broken it. "Well, there's somebody coming through the wood," thought John, and he glanced down through the leaves. But the tree was too thick for him to see anything below on the ground. He heard a match struck. Somebody was lighting a cigarette. Perhaps he was waiting for someone. John heard a slight cough down below. The man was under the tree. Another twig cracked. Then there came the sound of someone making his way through the bushes, and a low voice said, "That you, Lou?" "Yes," said the man under the tree. "Number 62, tomorrow." "Okay," said the other voice. And its owner made its way back through the bushes again. That was all. Not another word was said. The man under the tree went off, and in about 10 minutes' time, John saw him come out of the wood and get into the car. John strained his eyes to see the number of the car. He could make out the first two letters, ST, and the last figure, which was 0, but that was all. He wrote it down in his notebook. "Car number ST something something 0, he wrote. "Red in colour, sport saloon, can't see make." John often wrote things of this kind down, but as a rule they were all wasted. Still, you never knew. Things might come in useful sometime. He began to think about the strange message the man under the tree had given to the other, who was apparently already hidden in the wood. Number 62, tomorrow. What did it mean? What was number 62? And why tomorrow? John frowned and puzzled over it. Should he report what he had seen and heard? No, better not. It might be nothing again. Perhaps number 62 is a house somewhere they mean to burgle, thought John suddenly. Number 62. Where's there a number 62? It might be a fairly long street if there are over 60 houses in it. I'll go and do a little exploring. Before he slid cautiously down the tree, he listened to see if anyone might be about. The man hiding in the wood, for instance. But he could hear nothing, so down he went as quietly as he could. Once on the ground, he sped through the trees as if he were a rabbit with a dog after him. He went to the village. There must be a number 62 somewhere. What was the longest road? Yes, Summers Avenue must be. He went along it, looking for 62. 41, 43, 45... Oh, these are the odd numbers. I want the evens. He crossed the road and came to the evens. 42, 44, 46... Oh no, there are only two more. 48, 50. There's no 62. He went down another street, but there were even fewer houses there. That was no good. Then he went to Limmer Street, which was a terrace of small houses. Ah, there was a 62. Good. John looked hard at it. Nobody would want to rob a tiny house like that, surely. The curtains were dirty and ragged. 2 or 3 equally dirty and ragged children were playing on the doorstep. No, this couldn't be the 62. That was quite certain. Well, there's only the High Street left then, thought John, and went there. However, he felt that 62 could hardly be the one meant by the man, for it was the police station. It had no number, of course, but as it stood between shops labelled 60 and 64, it was clear that it must be 62, if it had a number at all. I can't understand it, said John, puzzled. There are only 2 62s, and one's a run-down little house, and the other's the police station. And perhaps the 62 doesn't mean the number of a house at all. Then he wondered if by any chance the number might be a telephone number. No, the man wouldn't have said 62 then. He would have said 62, because that was how telephone numbers were given. People said 10, not 10. They said 73, not 73. And the man would certainly have said 62, not 62. So telephone numbers were ruled out as well. Then what in the world could 62 mean? Should John go to the police now and tell them what he had heard? No, he still didn't want to, because it just might mean nothing, and he would be laughed at. He turned to go home. As he went, he saw a man running by in white singlet and shorts. Then, after a while, another came. They were practicing running for races. John stared at them idly. Then he stiffened. Each man had a number on, in big black figures. The first man's number was 14. The next man's was 34. Then came a third man, padding along. He was 53. John looked after the runners. Could the number 62 belong to one of these runners? Was it a man, number 62, that the fellow was talking of? If so, why? He went on towards his home, thinking hard. Daddy was at home. Perhaps he would be able to tell him about the runners and their big race. Yes, his father knew all about it. He had been a fine runner in his time, and he told John that there was to be a 10-mile race the next day on a certain route, and that, so far as he knew, almost 100 competitors were entered for it. Then there may be a number 62, asked John. Yes, of course. But why do you ask that? Said his father. Oh, I was thinking of something, said John. Daddy, is there a list of the competitors up anywhere? I'd like to have a look and see if I know any of them, if so. Yes, if you go along to the athletic club room, you're sure to see a list there, said his father. I didn't know you were so interested in running. John smiled and went off. He found the athletic club room and peeped in. The secretary was there. "What do you want, youngster?" he asked. Could I just look at the list of runners," said John, "for the 10-mile race tomorrow?" "Yes, it's over there," said the secretary, and pointed with his pen. "They start at Beamer's End, each running 2 minutes after the last, and they end at Longfield's club room." Do they run past Oak Tree Wood?" asked John. The secretary nodded. John began to look down the list of names. He came to number 62. 62. Laurie Baxter. Who was Laurie Baxter? He looked at the address. 16 Renfrew Street. That was a poor street in the next town. Laurie Baxter, 16 Renfrew Street. Now, why in the world should anyone want to kidnap Laurie Baxter running in a 10-mile race? "Who will win, do you think?" asked John. "Laurie Baxter?" "Good gracious, no," said the secretary. "He'll be about halfway. He's not much good." "Oh, well, thank you very much," said John, and went out. Now, was he right, or wasn't he, in thinking that Laurie Baxter was the number 62 that the man in the wood was telling the other fellow about for some reason or another? And was he right in thinking that the fellow in hiding was going to lie in wait for Laurie Baxter? If only he knew. He couldn't possibly go to the police and say, "I think that Laurie Baxter in tomorrow's race will probably disappear halfway through and not turn up at the end because somebody in Oak Tree Wood is lying in wait for him." It sounded too silly for words, and it might not be true. It was only what John thought, not what he knew. He wondered what to do. Then he decided that he too would hide at the edge of Oak Tree Wood just before the race, and he would see if anything happened. He could always give the alarm if an attack was made on number 62. So, the next afternoon, feeling rather excited, John made his way to Oak Tree Wood. He chose a tree that overlooked the stretch of road that ran by the wood, down which the runners would go, and he climbed it, making sure that there was nobody to see him. Then he sat on a branch and waited. After a long time, the first runner appeared. He was number 7. Apparently, they were not running in their right order, but just anyhow, each starting off 2 minutes after the last. Then number 16 appeared, and after him number 43. And then came 1, and 8, and 17, each some time after the other. Oh, would 62 never come? Then came one that looked like 62, but when he got nearer, John saw that it was 63. 3 or 4 more came, and then... Surely this was 62. It was. He was a weedy youth, not a very good runner, with thin shoulders and skinny legs. He came along the road to a curve. And then, things happened. Somebody shot out from the hedge, clamped strong arms round Laurie, and dragged him swiftly back into the undergrowth. His hand was over Laurie's mouth. John gasped. It was all so sudden. He caught a glimpse of a second man, and then Laurie was bundled away so quickly that except for a swishing of branches as the men forced their way into the undergrowth, there was nothing to be seen or heard. John shinned down the tree quickly. He ran after the men, but they had disappeared. Then, in the distance, he heard the sound of a car being started up. Oh, so the men had a car hidden somewhere in a glade, had they? Oh, if only he could see it and take its number. But by the time he got to the little clearing, the car was moving away, and all that John could see was that it was red. Red? Then probably it was the same car he had seen the man in the day before. He had got the 2 first letters and the last number of the car, but that was all. Blow. The car came to a road in the wood, and soon the sound of its engine died away in the distance. John sat down on an old tree trunk to think. Now he wished he had gone to the police and reported what he had thought might happen. It had happened. He didn't know why or what the men were after, but the thing was, Laurie Baxter had been attacked and taken away in a car. He'd better go to the police and tell them about that. So, off he went. He marched into the station and asked to speak to the sergeant, who was a friend of his uncle's. Then he told him what he knew. "Please, sir, Laurie Baxter, number 62 of the 10-mile runners, was attacked and taken off in a car just as he was running beside Oak Tree Wood," said John. "I saw it happen. I was up in a tree, waiting for it to happen, as a matter of fact." "Waiting for it to happen?" said the sergeant, surprised. "What do you mean? How did you know it would happen?" John told him everything. How he had overheard the number 62 in the wood said by the man from the car. How he had examined all houses that might be the 62 meant, and then how he had thought it must be the number 62 of the runners. "And it was," said John. "I wonder why Laurie Baxter was attacked, though." "I don't," said the sergeant grimly. "I have an idea that he was in a burglary committed 3 weeks ago, and that he got off with most of the goods and sold them, whilst the others got nothing. They were scared in the middle of the robbery, and 2 of them fled. But Laurie apparently didn't. He waited. Then, when all was quiet, he took the goods and made off. I reckon the other fellows are wild with him, and want to know what he's done with their share." "Oh," said John. "But why didn't you arrest Laurie then, if you knew all this?" "We questioned him and put a watch on him," said the sergeant. "But we thought if we let him go free, the others might make contact with him, and we'd put in the whole lot. But now it looks as if we'd lost them all." "Well, sir, I managed to get the first 2 letters and the last number of their car," said John eagerly. "Look, ST something 0. The car was red, sir, and was a sports saloon." "Good boy," said the sergeant, and took John's notebook. "Oh, this will help tremendously. We can stop all cars of this description." Then a radio call at once went out to police patrols. "Calling all cars, calling all cars. Please watch for a red car, make unknown, sports saloon type. First 2 letters are ST, last number 0, 3 men inside. Hold for questioning. Over." "Can I stay here and see if anything happens, please?" asked John, excited. "Right," said the sergeant. "Seeing that you brought us so much information, you can wait. I might want to ask you more questions, mightn't I?" So John waited. He had a cup of tea with the sergeant and felt very important. Many telephone calls came in, but nothing exciting, until at last there came the one the sergeant wanted. He turned to John. "I've got them! The car was caught at Reading. The whole number is STA 120. It's a Humber Sports Saloon, red. 3 men inside, one of them Laurie Baxter. Now we'll get going." They did. Laurie was so angry with his companions for attacking and kidnapping him that he gave the whole show away. He told where the rest of the unsold stolen goods were, and related his companion's share in the various robberies they had committed together. "So, now," finished the sergeant, smiling at the thrilled boy in front of him, "they'll all spend a nice quiet little time thinking over their sins in prison. They'll commit no more robberies for a while, thanks to you, Detective John." And Detective John went proudly home. He had solved another problem. Now, what would the next one be?